after hearing so much about clouds, I was going to keep on getting reminded of the rainy season outside. But then I decided not to talk about technology. So I have nothing technical in my slide except that I use PowerPoint. The subject came up as a discussion point in many one-on-ones that I have been having with a lot of my peers out there, and trying to figure out, every year we see a churn happening of CIOs moving from one company to another, which means there is a lot of hiring that's happening from outside, but not many happening which is rising internally. So what happens to succession planning? Is succession planning really happening? If it is happening, is it effective? Are you doing it? I don't have answers here in these slides. I have questions. So one request to the organizers here, if you can have some mics around, because I would like to have answers from you to build upon the presentation as we go along. But so my starting point is always a Dilbert, and I thought I should talk about succession planning the way Dilbert looks at it. So the guy says, you need to do succession planning. So he goes out there, talks to Alice, and guess what Alice does? So when you start looking at succession planning, I guess the starting point is not just looking at, okay, I need to do it, let me go and start. It doesn't really work that way. It's not like a technology you buy, deploy, and then scream on somebody to get it done. This is something that gets into what we call softer skills all along, but there's nothing soft about it. You sometimes got to be really hard. And that's been one of my realizations over so many years of having tried to do succession planning. This is a Raheja group. I just thought one slide to tell you about the span of control of the organization. We do commercial space, which is mind space, which is offices. We have commerce zone, which is also offices. Imperial Circle, which is business parks. Malls, of course, residential, hospitality, and of course retail. Across all this, some are listed companies, some are not, so I can't really give you a number in terms of how large we are, but yeah, I guess we believe we are larger than a lot of other people. So let's talk about succession planning again. One slide of selling is good enough. Why do we need to do succession planning? And this is where I would want inputs from you. These are some of the things that I could think of. Why people do succession planning. This is something that my boss has been telling me all along, at least in Shoppers Club. Think of the red bus principle. You get run over by a bus, what happens? Will the organization able to run? Is there any impact on IT? And I scratched my head and I said, no. So he said, then go away tomorrow. Why do you need to be here in this organization? Sometimes you have to be careful of the kind of answers you go. You have a need, a desire, an aspiration to move up, sideways, lateral movement, sometimes away also. So, do you think you need to have successors in your organization? Some companies talk about big words, retention strategy, I need to have talent development, etc., etc. I have a bit of a problem, I can't see half my audience there. I hope you can see the slides. Somebody talked about what the digital natives, immigrants, etc. The changing role of IT. As most of us are digital immigrants, I guess at least people who are in their 40s now. And from what I can see, most of us fall in that bracket, some probably younger, some probably older. So if the role of the CIO is going to be transformed significantly in the future, are we the right people to be driving it? Or should we be grooming somebody who understands that a lot more? And finally, this is the most obvious reason the organization wants you to do succession. Somebody in HR comes up, sends out a message to all the business heads. Hey guys, do your high potential assessment. We are going to do a succession planning. We'll do training programs, etc., etc. Right? Happens? Yeah. So, are there any other reasons? This is what I could think of. Can anyone give me any other reasons that you think causes you to think about succession planning? To get out at will, yeah. So you want to get out of the organization. You want to ensure there is no serious impact when you leave, right? Any other reasons? I can't see people there. Yeah. How many of you have actually gone into this kind of a discussion within your organizations, with your management, to say, I need to do succession planning? Does anyone ever do that, to say, whether you do it or not as an organization, I need to do it? I don't think many of us want to get into that kind of scenario, because anyway there is enough fires you're fighting, there are enough projects that you're running behind, vendors that you want to ensure they deliver to what they promise, etc., etc. You had something to say? Also to relax in Goa. So yeah, right now when all of us are sitting in Goa, is the IT organization running, or are you still on your email? People are calling you to say, what do I need to do? I don't think too many people are. I could see many people doing email, but I couldn't see too many people talking. So I guess at least most of us have evolved beyond being operational CIOs, right? So to that extent, at least nothing serious impacts the business in case you are away from office, which is why I think you can also take vacation sometimes. So where do you begin? And if you go through any theory or talk to any HR guy, he'll talk about the conventional way of doing succession planning. What is the conventional way? You do performance rating, you do potential rating, you do profiling, you do psychometric tests, etc., etc. I've gone through about 5 psychometric tests in the last 15 years. All of them told my bosses, I thought you knew that when you hired me. Why do you need to do psychometric tests? If you don't interact with me every day, then, and you still don't know me, then I don't know whether a psychometric test is going to tell you something different. So this is what most organizations do when they start looking at succession planning. And somewhere around 96, 97, I started challenging this when I was subjected to something like this. And I said, I don't think that's the right way to do it. And it was borne out over a period of time. In the last 15, 16 years, I felt my theory works slightly better, which is the unconventional way. And the unconventional way is fairly simple. It says everyone can be a CIO. Anyone who wants to, anyone who has the passion, as long as you understand the subject and you are able to articulate. What you need to then do is find that spark within that person in your team. Then discuss, debate, nudge, push, kick, whatever works. If the person really wants to, they'll probably evolve. If they don't want to, they'll either move away or they say, push off. I don't think I want to be a CIO. And I've had that discussion with many people in my team because within a year of my joining any organization, and I worked across many of them, the question that comes back from my team is, Arun, when are you moving out? Because I want to be in your chair. Because your life is very easy. You go to Goa, you go to Bangkok, you go to Thailand, all those places, to conferences, give speeches. We are struggling our asses off here. So, sounds very interesting. The grass always looks greener on the other side. So, but before you get into saying that, yes, this is fine, great, I also started thinking about something else. And this is a question to all of you. This is a question even to me which I was trying to answer. I did find some answers, but not too many. We all know people leave for various reasons, but you know why they stay. Have you ever thought about why people stay with you in your team? What makes them stay in the organization? The cooperative nature. Is that the primary thing that makes them stay? No option is one, yeah. Yeah. They stay with you. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. So I guess there are different perspectives that all of us would have in terms of why our team members like to work with us. Yeah. Yes, I think that's a very good point, because while somebody in the past designs something called the bell curve, right, which is supposed to say low performers, high performers, etc., etc. The bell curve has suddenly shifted on a 5-scale point. It is never starting from 1, it starts from around 3. which says meets expectations and typically tends towards 5. So I think the question that still I'm struggling with is, to some people, they don't have a choice. Or they are happy, contented being where they are, or they believe if they continue to perform well, they will move on up the ladder, etc., etc. So this is something I think you should do some introspection to at least find out the answer. It would help a lot in trying to understand the retention that you have in place and the attrition that you are suffering right now. And then you rate yourself to say, how do you assess your ability to hire and supervise people? One of those conventional theories says people always hire people who are equal to or less than their own intellect. And I had a difficulty in trying to understand that because I believe I am not very intellectual. So I try to hire people who I know I can depend on. Are you able to motivate people? And motivation varies from person to person. There's no one theory that applies to anyone. A lot of times, conflict is one of those reasons that people leave, because organizations have conflicts. Some are open, some are not open. It's also sometimes referred to as politics. So you have to be able to resolve those conflicts. And most of the time, they will look upon you as the leader to look at how you do it. Are you able to coach and mentor people? How effective are you in coaching? What happens to you under pressure? Because the way you behave, that's what your team sees, that's what they also imbibe amongst themselves to say, if this is the way my leader has been successful, maybe I should also practice something like that. And lastly, which is a little difficult, at least in some cases for some of us, to seek feedback on how you impact others. And it's not just your team, it's across the organization. And I went through a couple of such workshops which are on behavioral sciences to understand how I impact my others. And I realized what I thought was reality was not necessarily reality. So the mirror gets cleaned up very nicely for you, and then you realize, oh my God, I'm this. Difficult sometimes, but when you do appraisals, you are giving feedback typically. Do you also ask for feedback at that point of time? Because you have for probably an hour be telling your direct report, this is what you did well, this is what you did not do, this was an improvement opportunity, this is what you need to go for a training. A good conclusion there would be to say, now please tell me, how did I do with you? Was there something I missed out on? Could I have done something better which would have helped you succeed? And believe me, the kind of feedback you get is amazing. I've been trying to practice this for about 7-8 years now. In the initial stages, it was difficult for me, and the moment I got something, I would want to say something back. So no, I did that because. It happens a lot of times. And I said, shut up. Listen. You ask for feedback, learn how to accept it. Otherwise, don't ask for feedback. So let me give you a hypothesis, and this is open to discussion and debate. Everyone knows people join organizations and people leave their bosses. This has been talked about in many books. Is that true? Have you ever felt that way? When you left the organization, or whether somebody in your organization left? Is this a true hypothesis? Yes, it is. And we as bosses, but when somebody leaves, do we take accountability of that? To say, now I understand why that person left, I was one of the reasons. It's a very difficult thing to do. So if you are a boss and people are leaving you, I think what works, and this is what has worked for me in many cases, and feedback when it matters. I used to be very, very edgy in trying to give negative feedback. Go round and round in circles, make a big jalebi out of it before you finally tell the person what's wrong. And I said, I don't think that is going to help him or help me. Take facts, sit down across the table and have a conversation. In one of my MNC companies, they call it courageous conversations. Having a courageous conversation with your boss or with your direct report. And feedback is not only about improvement. This is where typically all of us focus, what you need to improve upon. And there was a very interesting quote I remember to say, the winners don't focus on their improvements, they focus on their strengths. Because that's what gets you where you are. So finally what you have to do is show them the path, not necessarily lead the way to say, this is how you do it. And that is where situational leadership comes into a large extent, depending on the kind of person you're dealing with. So don't tell the person how, help them find the direction. And that always works better. So I try to create a checklist of saying this is something, but in simpler words from what my HR organization has circulated 4 years back to say this is how we are going to identify high potential. And except I have twisted the words a little bit. He has to have the drive. He has to be independent and a team player at the same time. He has to be comfortable with business, great communication skills, presentation skills, negotiation skills. Of course, in IT delivery, effectiveness is also what matters, right? I said, this is all stuff that I know. Tell me something different. The problem is, I do all this and the person leaves, right? Happens. You find somebody bright in your team and say, great, this guy can be a worthy successor. I can depend on this guy as my man Friday or Saturday sometimes. And the person leaves. So that again set me thinking, because I had this situation once upon a time. The person left. And I depended on that guy a lot. The guy is brilliant. So I started wondering why. And then the realization came. We all live under the same sky, but we have different horizons. So what I thought was the driver for that person was not necessarily the driver for that person. And in that kind of scenario, I created one more hypothesis. Yeah? And this is again something that every attrition survey will tell you. People don't work for the money. If you take a Hewitt survey or any of those wonderful HR surveys, this is one of those points that come up. At the same time, if you see employee satisfaction surveys always rate pay as one of those things that people are not happy about. So then this is a kind of a contrast to each other. And it's also said people love challenges. If you have challenges, people will stay with you. If you have to give them. But if you don't get money and you keep on getting challenges, would you stay? The answer is no, because finally money and recognition matter. And one of those slides I remember from yesterday or today talked about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where I studied that a long time back when my wife was doing an MBA in HR, and it sounded very nice. And then I tried to always think of how many times I have been in that state of self-actualization. The answer is not too often. But I cherish those moments. So what happens when you do the investment, you identify the person, everything goes fine, and the person goes away. I think I mentioned that. Understand situational leadership, everyone is not the same. They need different ways of managing it. So what works for me may not work for somebody else, and that is where your leadership comes in. A lot of times we are worried, we are not able to accept the fact that the guy can fail. But then if you are empowering somebody, allow for the learning that would happen out of unsuccessful attempt. All of us, when we started to learn to swim, sometimes had that sinking feeling, oh my God, I'm drowning. And if you had let go, or if you had kind of said, no, I don't want to, you wouldn't have learned. So allow for that learning to happen. Let the person learn at his or her own pace. It makes a difference. On the other extreme, sometimes people delegate and don't follow up. We'll figure out what happens. Don't abdicate responsibility, because finally you as the boss are accountable for what happens in your organization. Try to understand the key motivators for persons, and they vary, like I said. Like my motivator has always been very different from what my other colleagues have been. But then finally, what you need to do as a boss is coach, mentor, and hold. And coaching and mentoring are very different. finally. Coaching, you will end up probably advising the person on some of those things that need to be done. In mentoring, you have to let the person find what needs to be done. But in both cases, hand-holding is important to say, I'm available for you whenever you need it. Finally, find opportunities for growth for those people who you are coaching. Because one of the things you have to understand, once your high potential is ready to take on the new challenge, are you ready to give him the new challenge to be given to that person? You have to be prepared for the challenge, because if you're not prepared for the challenge, what happens? The person will leave. One of the things that I have been seeing happening, at least in large organizations, is there's a cluster of people becoming the office of the CIO. And that's a good retention strategy, because then you're able to also share accountability with your team members effectively. This works typically in a federated IT model. It won't work in a unipolar kind of an organization. So what's the takeaway? I think the takeaway is fairly simple. Succession planning is important. Of course, everyone needs to do it. Everyone you put through the grind may not make it. Either they will get scared of the challenge, or they will probably leave because they did not find the opportunities in your organization good enough for them. But at the same time, you have to continue creating a talent pipeline, because you can't focus just on few people and then not do anything else about it. Your organization politics will define to a large extent how well it works, because in many companies there is something called lip service to this kind of initiative, not necessarily ingrained into the culture. And this is something I learned the hard way. Don't try to create clones of yourself. I was trying to do that once upon a time for somebody who I felt was brilliant. I says, you have to be like me. Or somebody, again, not too long ago came and said, I want to be like you. And I said, please don't be like me. Because you don't understand me well enough. Whatever you have seen on the periphery is not necessarily what I am. Sometimes even I don't understand who I am, because my wife also says so. Be prepared for the attrition, which happens to all of us. I'm happy to take a few questions right now. I think I have 5 minutes according to my allotted time. A lot of these thoughts and some others are available on my blog. Anyone interested, come there, post, no issues. It's open blog. Yeah.
You were mentioning about not to create a clone.
Yeah.
You mean the behavioral aspect of it, or leadership?
Both. And see, every person is unique to the extent that they have found their formula for success, which is what has got them wherever they are, to the level just below you. Now, from there, if you want to create a transformation to say this person should be like me, probably then you're not really creating a great opportunity for that person, because it may not be the natural person behavior in that scenario. So, yeah.
Arun, I have two points. One is like most of the organizations, the gap between the CEO and the next level persons, very much.
Yeah.
I think that creates all the problems. And more or less, you lead the show, and the people under you are lazy. They are comfortable.
Perception.
Yeah, perception. And suppose in this scenario, you try to identify another person from outside for you, as a successor for you.
Yeah.
But how to manage the internal team for this test?
It's about first creating the awareness within your team to say why none of you are as yet at a level where you can start aspiring to be a CIO. And then tell them what is the time frame in which you believe it is likely to. If we did not do that, the moment the new person joins, some of them will leave. Right? So it's a lot about trying to first create that awareness in the organization, why I'm doing this, what is important. And I've just gone through that phase in one of my companies where I've hired somebody from outside as a person who will succeed and become the CIO of that entity. Because I couldn't find anyone internally in that entity who was ready to move on to that level, even though there were people with 15, 16 years experience, but they were not necessarily leadership qualities ingrained in them, and the coaching time would have been too long. I didn't want to wait that long. My time frame was 2 years. In 2 years, I need to have somebody who is ready. Yep.
Mr. Arun, I'm Corina from GIC Housing Finance.
Yes.
In one of your slides, you had a comment, delegate but do not
Abdicate. Correct.
What do you mean to say? Do you say that we do it or don't do it?
I'm saying when you delegate, don't create a scenario where there is no follow-up, there is no reporting back, because that would mean that you have kind of given away the entire thing, which is abdication of responsibility, because finally, please remember, you are responsible as the CIO.
Some people don't like, us to keep on following up with them. They feel that
so which is where
looking down your neck.
So that is where, like I said, situational leadership comes in. And if you're interested in the model, the way it is given by Kenneth Blanchard, he has a book called Situational Leadership and the 1 Minute Manager. Read it. It will give you some insights, because he's classified people into 4 different buckets: a learner, to a person who's an expert, and 2 in between. With a learner, you will behave differently. With the expert, you will behave differently. And that's what situational leadership was all about. When you give it to an expert, yes, you should not be breathing down that person's neck, but at the same time, you need to have the accountability coming back to you to say, I need a status report, which is not looking down your neck, but I need to know where you are. And you could probably go around the organization and have casual conversations, which we call water cooler conversations, kind of lift elevator conversations, to say, how is the person doing? Is he really managing it the way he's representing it? Because sometimes there's misreporting also that happens.
So it's important to abdicate.
No, it is not. It is important not to abdicate. Abdication means I don't care. If that's the word that I believe you're not able to associate with. Any last question? Yes, one in the back.
Hi Arun, Suresh Kumar.
Yeah.
See, my feedback which you mentioned, I had similar kind of a system, and it always used to be you ask for feedback from your direct reports, and invariably people will try to give you feedback which is very, very good and all that. Just listen here. Okay. Maybe because of whatever reasons, and I found that there must be at least something which is I want to do right, or which could be where I could improve. And even in large teams, I tried to do that direct kind of feedback. Always it used to be that. So what I have got into a system which is like across my organization. Not only for me, so it's all for all the senior people. It's kind of an anonymous feedback, where you take feedback not only from your direct source, but also from people in a similar kind of a thing. And that has been more effective, in the sense that I now get to see certain remarks, comments, which I knew there could be issues, but which were never forthcoming. So I find that to be a better method of taking feedback. It's more anonymous, and people may be scared of whatever your direct reports. Okay, whether it might affect them in any way, even if you try to be, very flat. You say, "Oh, I'm your friend, and I'm not your boss," but still people have some kind of fear in their mind.
I agree with you to the extent that yes, that's largely the phenomena. 360-degree feedbacks work quite well, rather than just doing an anonymous feedback, because anonymous feedback can get misused also. So, but if you do a structured 360-degree feedback where anyway the person is anonymous, it works a lot better. Second, I guess one of the reasons people don't give you feedback is because of cultural reasons. How can I tell the boss what improvement? Second, fear of retaliation. Now, fear of retaliation happens because of either past experience or hearsay within the organization. If the organization has cultural values which promote open feedback and discussion and dialogue, over a period of time it happens. It doesn't happen in a hurry, but like for example, in my current company, I've been here now for 4 years. The first year and the second year I was getting that, yeah, you're great, wonderful, best boss I have had. And then I slowly started asking questions to say, I don't think I was effective in my introspection, so how can you tell me I was great? And I showed my human side to them. So that is where the feedback started coming slowly and steadily. Because otherwise, one of those things that we have is that hierarchy in an organization is just very, very sacrosanct. And we have to be able to find a way of breaking that barrier. I think my time is over. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to all of you.